You are listening to Leaders and Legends, a podcast presented by Veteran Strategies, an Indiana-based public relations enterprise, and federally certified veteran-owned small business. I'm your host, Robert Bain, along with our producer, Chris Spangle. Our podcast is featured on the All Indiana Podcast Network in partnership with Wish TV. You may find Leaders and Legends at allindianapodcastnetwork.com. Thinking of starting a podcast or need to host a public meeting? Let Leaders and Legends LLC be your partner as you look for new ways to communicate your message. Please contact us at chris@leadersandlegends.net. As always, all our podcast interviews are dedicated to the legacy and generosity of P.E. McAllister. Our guest is Tim Matheson. He is the author of Damn Glad to Meet You, My 7 Decades in the Hollywood Trenches. Mr. Matheson, thank you for coming on the podcast.
Oh, and Robert, please call me Tim, and it's a pleasure to be with you.
Thank you, sir, very much. We're a fan of subtitles here on the Leaders and Legends podcast. My 7 Decades in the Hollywood Trenches. First off, I can't believe it's 7 decades. You probably feel
Well, it
the
was
same.
6.5, but I rounded up, you know what that is.
What's it like being in the Hollywood trenches?
Well, it's rough and tumble, you know, and I think from my favorite actors that I worked with and legends that I, shared the screen with, well, I learned that it is a tough business. You're going to get knocked down. It's like pro sports. I mean, that was one of the lessons I got from Kurt Russell is that it's the resilience it takes to be a semi-pro baseball player is the same resilience you apply to yourself as an actor. And you don't take yourself too seriously. You don't take your successes too seriously or your failures too seriously. You just have to find that middle ground, keep slugging, keep practicing, and it's a mental game. And you're going to get knocked down, and you got to figure out how to get back up and keep going.
We're going to jump all around, if that's okay, for the 30 minutes we have.
Yeah, please.
I should mention that, ask him very quickly, what's it like? You're a fellow Capricorn. I was born on December 22nd, 1967. Sorry.
Yes.
What's it like born on New Year's Eve? You just party out every year?
Well, there was a time when I did that, sure. But my earliest memory about it was you could tell who really was, who loved you and who really sort of like you were sort of okay, because my aunt Estelle, who dearly loved me, would give me special birthday presents. She'd make apple pies for me or fried apple pies for my birthday, and then give me a special Christmas present as well that she'd bake for me. But then a lot of people would go, oh, here's a present on Christmas, but this for your birthday too. And it's like, wait a minute. And you've probably seen that. It's like, hey, it's like if your birthday was in June and it's like, oh, this is for Christmas and your birthday. Get out of here. So I learned early on how to divide the people who really cared and the people who didn't care as much.
It's excuse to be cheap. My brother's birthday is 12/30/60.
Oh, yeah.
You can't see the video because we only post the audio on the podcast, but for a man who's going to be 80 in about 18 months, you are as handsome as you were in the grocery store way back when. Another few questions real quick. I love the movie 1941 and saw it multiple times as a kid. Am I wrong?
No, you know what? No, it's anything Steven Spielberg does is an exceptionally well-crafted, smartly made movie, and he is a master filmmaker, perhaps one of the greatest that ever lived. And he always stretches himself and goes into different genres, horror and sci-fi and adventure, action adventure, and Jurassic Park. I mean, so he always challenges himself, and he saw 1941. I mean, he saw Animal House and Park. He said, "Oh, I want to do a comedy." And a new kind of comedy. And so he was taking a shot at doing that. And I value his adventure, the adventurous aspect and nature of his personality, that he'll try things and take risks like that. And it's also a lesson that you should learn is don't be afraid of failing. Don't be afraid of taking a shot at something. And it doesn't work as well as others could have, or the next one would. I think he did E.T. right after 1941. So, I mean, it's okay. And that's also part of entertainment and sports and everything. You're not going to go 5 for 5 every game. You're going to have slumps. You're going to have games where they can't stop you. So it's something you have to learn, I think, and you learn as much from your failures as you do your successes.
Well, I never thought I'd have the opportunity, but I guess I should thank you for helping me get through puberty by opening Nancy Allen's Bombay Doors. I think if there was a VCR at the time, that would have been paused.
Your day moves fast. Your news should too. That's why there's a new and improved Wish TV app, bringing you more local news, breaking alerts, live streaming, weather forecast, radar, and Indiana sports, all in one place. Customize your news feed to see the stories that matter most to you and get the information you need when you need it. Download the new and improved Wish TV app today on iOS or Android and take News 8 with you everywhere.
Oh my gosh, I was so in love with Nancy, and I adored working with her. And basically, my whole part of that movie was just spent with Nancy. And how
And
bad
you had
can
an
that be?
opportunity, forgive me, sir, you had an opportunity for another role, and you chose the role in that movie that gave you more time with Nancy. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yeah, Steven asked me he said, there's a couple of different parts you could play, and which one would you like to do? And I found that to be the most interesting character. Loomis Burkhead, I think is his name. And it gave me an opportunity to work with Nancy every day and night. And I was so enamored with her. And I was I was gonna get to the point of telling her how much I adored her, and it's try and create a relationship. And I got to the set that day, and Steven said, "Oh, we have a visitor. We got great directors here. It's, Brian De Palma's here." And I thought, "Oh my gosh, that's great." And Brian was there to propose to Nancy Allen because they'd had a relationship that had been on again and off again, and he realized she was getting away from him, so he flew out to L.A. and got down on his knee and proposed to her the day I was going to propose something else. But such was life.
You're listening to the Leaders and Legends podcast. Our guest today, our very special guest, is actor, director, and author Tim Matheson. Thank you so much to you and your team for getting this together on just a couple of days. So
Oh,
we did not have a time to make a pot for you, but if you ever come back on, we will have that done.
Von Leibowitz will make that pot. Yeah.
Leave It to Beaver was one of your first roles. Is that correct?
Yes, it was. And it was, I think, one of my first important roles. I mean, I was just an actor who would do a day here and a day there, a couple of lines in this show and that. And I was cast, I remember auditioning for Leave It to Beaver, and they wanted me, I auditioned and went well. And they said, "Oh, why don't you do like this character wants to be in 3 different episodes." And I thought, wow, I've landed, I've arrived in Hollywood. I mean, I am now a legitimate actor. And because Leave It to Beaver, that was a huge hit on TV, and I'd been watching it for years. So I thought, wow, I'm on a show that I've watched forever, and I'm part of that world. And they couldn't have been nicer and more professional, and really, really good directors who knew how to deal with children and make them relaxed and make them seem very natural by giving us a lot of things to do during the scene so that we wouldn't be focused just on delivering the lines. It was very, very smart.
I guess the most important question for your role on Leave It to Beaver is, did Barbara Billingsley speak jive to you?
No, no. I know it's
And
an
what
airplane. Um,
what did you think when you saw her on Airplane? I'm assuming you've seen the movie and you're like, "Oh, my stars."
well, that was the brilliance of Airplane. They took all of these iconic characters, Peter Graves and Robert Stack and Lloyd Bridges, and they took them and the Kareem, and I mean, not Kareem. Yeah, it was Kareem, and
Kareem.
took them and made them comedic parodies of who they personified, earlier on, and cast them against type. So it was brilliant. It was brilliant, and it was a movie that I had been offered, and I couldn't do it because I was in 1941, and I wanted very much to do Airplane, and because it was, along with Animal House, I think the first two films that revolutionized and reoriented comedy for young people by young people, and they changed the course of Hollywood comedies, and it spawned a whole new genre of movie. And Airplane and Animal House were right at the leadership parts of that transition.
Settle an argument for me. It's similar somewhat to the Bruce Willis is Die Hard, a Christmas movie, but where I grew up on the east side of Indianapolis in the 70s and 80s, there was a constant sort of back and forth. Which movie? I think I know your answer, but I'll guess anyway, or ask you, excuse me, which movie's funnier, Animal House or Caddyshack?
Animal House, I think, because it's tighter. And now, same writer, Harold Ramis and it directed it, and
Bill
Doug
Kenny.
Kenny.
Yeah, Doug Kenny,
And
excuse me.
But I think that, if you look at the makings of those movies, Animal House was a very precise script that we stuck to, and only with few improvisational elements here and there, and very script-oriented director. And John Landis and it was Harold Ramis's first movie as a director, so he let the actors kind of do their thing, and it was one of those movies. I think Caddyshack, which I adore, it's a great part for Chevy and Bill Murray, but the movie sort of grew as they shot it, and
That's right.
it wasn't really as precise and orchestrated as Animal House was, which was, you see the script and then you see the movie, and it's pretty much that's what it is, with certain embellishments. But look, all roads lead to Rome, so that there's two ways you make a comedy. And Harold, I think, was onto something. Harold Ramis was something they do now. You just turn the camera on and you let Billy Murray just go, or you let Chevy go, and you take the best takes and you put them together and you build a story around that. And that's what Harold was brilliant at. And also, a dear man, and an extremely talented writer, director. And I'm sorry I never got a chance to work with him again, but but I think that's the difference between Caddyshack and Animal House.
There's an argument to be made that Harold Ramis is the funniest person who ever lived. Brilliantly funny in the way he could write, improv, everything. How much was his death a wake up call for you? Not because of drugs or any of that stuff, because that's maybe more of a Belushi question. But, when you get older in the business, do you start to feel a little bit more mortal?
Oh, sure. But we felt that early on with the loss of Doug Kenny and John Belushi, and the extreme talent and brilliance of those two gentlemen, and the loss at 33 years old of both of them, and the fact that we don't have them around now, or even for the 10, 20, 30 years after that, after their passing, that they would have contributed. Harold, on the other hand, was not involved in Animal House. He was, at the end, the backstage story was, Harold wrote the part of Boone for himself. And Harold was an actor, in Second City, and he was quite a good performer. But John Landis, the director of Animal House, just thought, no, Harold's too old. He's not going to be in this now. And he left it to Ivan Reitman, Harold's good friend, to tell Harold that he couldn't be in the movie. And Harold was very annoyed, and he never came to the set. I think he was in a few auditions, but I think that's maybe where I met him. But he didn't have anything to do with the movie. And Doug Kenny and Chris Miller, the other two writers, showed up on the set, and Landis used them as actors in the Delta House and as Hardbar and Stork. And so they were there, and it contributed to rewrite certain scenes and stuff while we were shooting. Harold, on the other hand, was still annoyed, and he wasn't in the movie, and he didn't show up. So we only saw him peripherally afterwards. And I think I met him after the picture was over at his house. He invited us over, and I met him. And so I knew him through the years, but never as closely as I did, say, Chris Miller or Doug Kenny. But I loved his work. And Harold had so much heart. I mean, he was funny, but he was more about really like Groundhog Day is a brilliant film. And it's about second chances and a guy who's a jerk learning how not to be a jerk. And, and that's funny.
And it's
And
a
yeah,
wonderful moment in the
yeah.
Oscars when Bill Murray's presenting the award and he mentions all the nominees are mentioned. And then before Bill Murray opens the envelope, he says, "We forgot one." I don't know if you've ever seen this clip, but we forgot one. Harold Ramis, Animal House, or I think he says Caddyshack, Ghostbusters, and Groundhog Day. So after either Harold Ramis passed or was very sick, Murray mentioned him on the Oscars as someone, and they had nothing to do with the awards. I just thought it was
Oh,
a beautiful way to say goodbye. We are,
yeah, because they'd had a falling out
yeah.
on Groundhog Day and didn't speak for years. And I don't think until Harold was sick and that I think Billy had a police escort and took him to Harold's house and he barged in and made up with him and, tried to give him a laugh, and it shows you who Billy is and I think, and who Harold was. And Harold was deeply loved by everyone.
You're listening to the Leaders and Legends podcast. Our guest is Tim Matheson. He is the author of Damn Glad to Meet You, My 7 Decades in the Hollywood Trenches. I want to mention, obviously, Animal House in a little bit more detail here in a minute, but 2 movies I want to mention that came out before Animal House. And that's 1968, Yours, Mine, and Ours. If you would take us just a second, tell us about Lucille Ball and how she shaped your career.
One of the giants of our industry, a comedic genius, who you look at I Love Lucy and anything she ever did. And also, she was the first female executive of a studio in Hollywood, which few people know, but she ran Desilu Studios that she and her former husband, Desi Arnaz, had put together and on the success of I Love Lucy. And, they produced The Untouchables and Star Trek and other shows like that and were very popular, but it was demanding. And she ran that. They owned like 3 different lots over Hollywood. And so she was, and she shared with me her techniques occasionally about how she crafted a scene. But then you work with somebody like that and you watch how they prepare and you watch the precision which she would construct the physical motion of a scene to get the laugh on the physicality of it. It was a tremendous lesson for me to work with her and Henry Fonda,
I
who
was going
was
to say this guy named Henry Fonda just happened to, but it's a brilliant movie. Second one I want to ask you, it's Clint Eastwood's personal favorite Dirty Harry movie, and that is Magnum Force. Came out in 1973. A little different role for you. It's a terrific movie based on an actual event, I think in Argentina or someplace in South America where they had this sort of police rogue squad.
uh,
All kinds of great actors in it with you, young actors. Vegas, Robert Urich,
yeah.
and I don't know if was he Starsky or Hutch. I can't remember. David Soul. What was it like working with Clint Eastwood, especially on a movie like that, which is really kind of making its own statement when crime was seen as so rampant in the early 70s?
First off, I was so ignorant at the time. I knew Clint. I mean, I knew he was from TV. I hadn't seen his, Fistful of Dollars, Few Dollars More, his Sergio Leone movies, but he was a big star. And I just thought, oh, and I don't even think at that point I'd seen Dirty Harry. So I kind of thought this guy just got lucky. He's a TV actor, got lucky. He's going to have a few years of being a movie star, and that's going to be the end of it. And I showed up at work and I kind of, introduced myself to him the first day. And I said, hey, you want to rehearse anything? I'd be happy to do it. And he goes, no, I don't much like rehearsal like that. I kind of like to capture it for the first time the words are said on camera. And I said, great, Clint, whatever you want. I walked away thinking, not a real actor. He's lazy, geez. But there was a brilliance to his technique, and it sort of speaks back to John Ford and early directors and Spencer Tracy and Henry Fonda, that there's some truth to that especially the more dramatic scenes and the more important scenes in a movie, don't over rehearse them. Just capture them on film. John Ford, the director, would do that often. and with the right actors.
No.
And Clint was that actor. He was so spontaneous and so real and made it so natural. So that by the end of that day working with him, I walked away going, I'd learned so much. And I walked away going, this guy is the real deal. He is just a champion. And I was totally won over by him. He couldn't have been more gracious to me, to anybody who was a fan, anybody who stopped him on the street and came up to him. He had the same crew dedicated to him that worked with him. Probably many of them and their sons and daughters work with him through his retirement recently. He's 95 now, but they worked with him for decades because they loved working with him and they loved the work he did and his dedication to the craft and how quickly he did it, because he didn't do take after take and try and change that word and thing. He'd print the rehearsal just because it was loose and it was fun and it was something happened and something fell down and you reacted to it. It was just, that's how Clinton was. And I learned a great deal from him on that show.
You mentioned the movies that changed movie history. There were so many in the 70s. Airport, the first disaster movie. We've had plenty of those. One of the very good late era screwball comedies, What's Up, Doc? Obviously, you had The Exorcist. But in 1978, a movie was issued called Animal House, which I think the poster was almost in every teenager's room. They just ask you some very quick questions. What's your favorite otter line?
Mine's bigger, I think. Damn glad to meet you certainly is right up there. And the things that people say to me more often than not when they're referring to Animal House. But there were so many brilliant ones, and you could tell the movie was working because they'd show dailies to the crew that, the things we'd shot in the week before on Sunday, and they'd come in on Monday quoting lines from the previous week of scenes they'd seen from the day before on dailies. And we sort of had an idea, wow, this is working, because they'd quote lines, like, damn glad to meet you, or like pre-med, pre-law, what's the difference? It just, there was a spirit and it was, and we did it in 5 weeks. We shot that movie in 5 weeks, which was 30 days because it was 6-day weeks, and which was amazingly fast for a movie. It was the cheapest movie Universal made that year because they did not want to make it. They didn't believe in it. And it was a series of miracles and fortuitous mistakes and accidents that happened that got it finally released. And great producers like Ivan Reitman and Matty Simmons and John Landis made that movie happen.
What's your favorite non-otter line?
Excuse me. Gosh.
I'm sorry, I'm thinking of him in my mind and I'm laughing. All I could think of is John Belushi saying, see if you can guess what I am now.
Oh, totally. I mean, but I think some of my favorite things with the slugs under the characters in the freeze frames at the end, like Niedermeyer, killed by his own troops in Vietnam,
raped in prison, Nixon White House.
Right. And the and
who came up with you
Senator
as
John Blutarsky,
who came up with you as being a gynecologist? Forgive me.
That was always there. And I think the only one that changed was Babs being a tour guide at Universal. I think it was something different in the script, and it perhaps changed during production.
How much input did you have into crafting Eric Stratton?
We would always be invited to, toss in and throw in suggestions and lines and a rehearsal. We'd try things and it was my first comedy. So I kept, trying to feel, is this too much? Is that too much? But John Landis, our director, was brilliant because he said, the deltas can't be mean to anyone or each other. And because the audience then won't like you. The Omegas, the bad guys, they were mean to everybody. They were racist, sexist, and all that. And the Deltas, we were a fraternity that anybody could get into. No, we never turned anybody down.
We need the dues.
That's right. So
I'm sorry.
So they were the anti fraternity, but everybody who ever saw the movie feels like they were in the Deltas. But it was a club that would let anybody in.
Did they keep the Omegas, did it keep you guys separated? Because I've watched a lot
Oh,
of documentaries about the movie, and then it's in your book, but they purposely kept you guys apart to raise the antagonism or the lack
well,
of familiarity.
it brought the Deltas together. All of us Deltas up there a week early. Belushi got there, I think, 2 or 3 days early. And so we bonded, whereas the Omegas showed up just like actors the weekend before we started shooting, and they didn't get to know each other, and they didn't spend that kind of time together. Although when they were shooting, they bonded and did, but we just by, as actors, we bonded together, and we did not have much to do with the Deltas, with the Omegas at all. The Deltas were the Deltas, we were the cool guys, and you guys are. When Niedermeyer, Mark Metcalf, first showed up on location, walked into the dining room of the hotel we were staying at, everybody starts throwing food at him, and just pelted him, boo, boo, and sis, and just giving him nothing but grief, just for fun.
Has any woman other than Mandy Pepperidge say, Otter, wasn't that great?
Not great, never.
How did you escape being on Law and Order?
Gosh,
There were so many Animal House actors on. Boone was on, D-Day was on, a
you
couple
kind
more,
of
I
wanted
think.
to live in New York, and all those guys lived in New York, and if you lived in New York, you really, you got a chance to be. They'd hire you because they wouldn't fly in actors from L.A. I don't think very often, and there was a period of time that was back in the day when you wanted to either be you wanted to get out of television and be a movie actor. And because nowadays you do both, everybody's doing everything. But then you wanted to get out of TV and get into movies, and that's what I did. So many times, once you were in movies, I don't want to do TV. I don't want to do that. And, so probably that was more to do with that than anything.
We've reached the point. There's so many other questions I want to ask you, but before I do, we have something called the 5 questions. We end every podcast. 5 questions. We would love to, if you ever have time and your team was fabulous, if you ever have time to come back for another half hour, we'd love to have you.
Oh,
I'll,
thank you,
I'll
Robbie.
buy 20 copies of your book and send them
Okay.
to whoever you want. Tell me about joining very quickly the Marine Corps Reserve. That was an extraordinarily rare decision at the time you made the decision. Hollywood has a great history of Marines serving. Lee Marvin was in the Marine Corps. Gene Hackman was in the Marine Corps. What made you
Yeah.
make that decision?
I was not for the war. I did not want to get drafted because I felt that if I went as a draftee, I wouldn't have the training that would be appropriate to hopefully survive being shipped over there. And being a reservist was a sort of I could give to my country, but then I could also continue my career. I could be back home, and in case of a severe emergency, then they'd activate you and take you to wherever the troubles were. But I revered the Marine Corps because I knew they were the most highly trained and most efficient and effective military force that we had, and the toughest at the time. And so I was proud to be a part of it. And it was also self-serving because I wanted to be able to continue my career and hopefully not end up in Vietnam. And all other reserves were activated except for the Marine Corps. God knows why. But yeah, so it made a man of me, and it made me a grown-up, and it taught me tremendous lessons about myself, about my endurance, and about strength, and about camaraderie and brotherhood that I'll never forget.
What year did you join?
1967,
It was right in the thick of it.
maybe 68.
My mother and my father were in the Marine Corps. So
Wow.
they met.
Congratulations.
In
Thank you
my
for
3 years in the Army, it was a profound embarrassment to them. 5 questions with actor, writer, director Tim Matheson. What was your first job?
Window on Main Street with Robert Young from Father Knows Best. I had a 1-day 3-line part, and I did well enough that they invited me back to come back in a couple of weeks and do a 2-day part, which I thought, wow, this is rolling. I'm going. I got my career on its way.
What was your first concert?
Ray Charles and the Ray Leps, and I saw him in Glendale at a very small theater, and just, I loved Ray Charles. I just couldn't believe him. To watch him play piano and sing, and it was amazing.
Other than Damn Glad to Meet You, if you could suggest any book for someone to read, which book would you recommend?
There's a great book about Clint, biography about Clint Eastwood. Then, let me think. I read I think that Robert Rodriguez wrote a book about the making of his first movie, where he sold, I think he sold blood or did, medical experiments to get the money to make his little movie. So, but any book about someone you admire as a performer or as a director. I've learned a lot about reading about directors. Another book I read called The Making of the Wizard of Oz by Al Jean Harmitz was by department how that movie was made at MGM. So it really instructed me how a movie was put together and constructed from each different department, and it helped me as a director.
And you're a Hollywood history buff, I know. I'd love to talk Hollywood history because it's so fascinating.
Yeah.
Number 4, if you could witness any event in history, be there in person as it happens, which event would you choose?
I think maybe JFK's inauguration, a Cape Kennedy or Cape Canaveral space launch, one I did attend was the impeachment trial of President Clinton. I flew to Washington, and I had a friend who was a senator, Senator Max Cleland of Georgia.
Oh yeah, Georgia.
Yeah.
Speaking of a hero.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. Amazing man, a war hero. And he got me in, and I spent a week there going to the hearings because I feared for our republic.
If you could have dinner with anyone living today, 2 hours off the record just to chat, whom would you choose?
Gosh.
You've had dinner with so many wonderful people.
Yeah, I mean, just so many I admire. Harrison Ford, perhaps. Kurt Russell, who was an old buddy of mine. I haven't seen him in a while. Let's see. And political figures that I admire.
Barack Obama is the most
Yes.
popular answer to that question.
Yeah, and certainly President Obama. I mean, yeah, he's at the top of the list. Thank you.
I'll ask you 2 quick questions I've never asked anyone on this podcast, ever. First one, was it over when the Germans bombed Pearl Harbor?
He's on a roll.
Second, what is the difference between sensual and sensuous?
One starts one conversation, one ends a conversation.
You have been listening to Leaders and Legends, a podcast presented by Veteran Strategies. We are an Indiana-based public relations enterprise. As always, all our podcast interviews are dedicated to the legacy and generosity of P.E. McAllister, another veteran. Mr. Matheson, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I'd love to have you again if you had a half hour to spare, but your book is terrific, as is your kindness and your charm. Everything that made Eric Stratton one hell of a swordsman comes out still just today.
Oh, Robert, thank you very much. Thank you for your service, and thank you for inviting me today.
Thank you very much for listening to Leaders and Legends, brought to you by Veteran Strategies Incorporated. If you want to contact us about this program or our menu of public relations services, please send us an email at robert@veteranstrategies.com. That's robert@veteranstrategies.com.